Hello, and welcome to another episode of the VtES podcast, where we talk casual VtES with friends across various topics. Today, we're gonna have a little bit of a special topic. We're midway through the Fall of London spoilers season for the newest VtES set. But before we start the video, I'd like to take this opportunity to remind you that if you like the video, do give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below, and also share this video with your friends. All of these helps the algorithm a lot and does help the channel a lot. Also, if you want to support whatever I'm doing directly, you can do so over at patreon.com/swakuoz. And I'm not going to be the one to be talking about the Fall of London set today. I do have a special guest with me all the way from the UK, the one, the only, Mike Nudd. Hello, and welcome to the podcast.
Welcome. Thanks. Thanks for the invitation, and I'm happy to be here.
So, for viewers at home who aren't familiar with who you are or aren't familiar with your latest bit of work for VtES, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm a British guy. I'm based in the UK. I pretty much lived here all my life. I'm a big fan of tabletop gaming in general, role playing, board games, card games, you name it. Miniatures games, and I love it all really. You can't see like the rest of my man cave here, but this is all just basically just full of different sort of gaming paraphernalia. I've been into it since a teenager. Never left really. As well as playing games, I've always loved coming up with ideas for games or experimenting with how to change games and coming up with new games, which has kind of led into me becoming like a published game designer as well. Not full time. I'm not that it's not that exciting. I'm not that successful yet. I just do it in my spare time. But I've had a number of different board games published or that I've been involved in developing, and plus there's VtES as well. And hoping to do more of that. Really, sort of going forwards. I mean, obviously, the pipe dream, the blue sky, is like do some really successful game that lets me retire and not have to have a day job anymore. But that's quite a long way away at this point. But you never know. We'll see what happens.
Fair enough. That's the dream, isn't it?
I know some people that do it. I mean, I'm acquainted with this guy David VtES, who's quite famous on the board game scene. He used to live in the UK. He's moved overseas now, but he just literally just quit his job one day, rang up a bunch of board game companies, and were like, "I've got these ideas, these games. If I make it, will you buy it?" And they all said yes. And he was like, "Right, quit my job. I'm just going to do this." And he's definitely making it work. But that's very much the exception to the rule, really.
Definitely looking forward to seeing you get there. There will be exciting times, not just for you, but also for anyone else who's the games that you design. Because we definitely need, God knows with what we've got going on in the world right now, we need to have more games. Really.
Yeah, it's gaming generally. I mean, it's a great distraction, I guess, from some of the more unpleasant things that are happening in the background. But also a great way to meet friends and family. I very much like the social side of gaming, which is one of the reasons why I love VtES, because there's such a big social element to it. But I go regularly to different games conventions, mostly just to catch up with people I haven't seen in a while, get people to try games and get their opinions I value. That's it's great. Mm-hmm.
Speaking of VtES, would you mind sharing a bit about how you got into VtES, or actually indeed the world of darkness at large?
Back to the whole love of games thing. When I was a teenager, I fell in with a bunch of older kids and into like a role playing group where we were playing different games, a lot of D&D, I guess, and I was trying to find a game that could be like my game to run, that I could maybe get a bit of reputation for running, maybe. And when Vampire came out back in '91, I think it was 15, and that was like, as soon as I picked it up, I was like, well, this is so different. This is my game. It's like doing some really interesting things. So like I was into reading Anne Rice, and like The Lost Boys was like a great film, and it's like all these different pieces like the puzzle came together, and I was like, yeah, I'm running this for all my friends at college, and just picked it up and I've never left, really. I mean, you can see in the background here, this is my World of Darkness book collection that's been accumulating since the 90s. I've got pretty much everything for Vampire and Mage, and I've got some gaps of wealth I still need to fill that I'm still got a BDI on eBay for. But yeah, there's I know it pretty well. And at the same time, as I was going into college, I got into Magic the Gathering at the same time, because it's which was good fun to play. It was a good little filler. Like, you sit in the common area where me and my friends would hang out, like during breaks, during lunch, and so on. It's like, oh, let's have a quick game of Magic, and we'd be playing that all the time and trading cards and so on. And then when VtES came out off the back of Magic, I was like, hang on, so I'm really into the role-playing game. All my friends are really into that, and we've all been playing Magic, so we all just kind of switched from playing Magic to playing VtES as soon as it came out. Just got all the original brown cards, and we were playing that to death, experimenting with different formats. At one point, we were playing with the idea of a hidden pool, where you'd actually have a little cup that you put your pool in. Nobody else could see how much pool you had, and you would only count it if like when parity shift or something came up, and you had to count it. Otherwise, you didn't know. Like, I'll bleed you for one more. Is that enough? And you just didn't know. And also playing ridiculous games of like 8, 9, 10 people around the table as well, that would just take all night to play, and just having a bit of fun with it. But and then I went off to university, and wasn't doing that much about it. But then after university, and sort of came back and was doing more. I reconnected with some of those old guys that I was playing with before, and went to some conventions and then went to there's like a Gen Con UK that used to happen. It's like the huge Gen Con event in the States, which is like really, really big. There used to be a UK version that TSR and then Wizards used to run in the UK that was much, much smaller. But I walked in there, and there was on the list, there's a VtES tournament happening. I'm like, oh, people play this seriously? Okay. And took a Tremere deck and sat down with these dozen other guys, and was like, that's how you really play this game. It's like, yeah, all this deal making and table talk and bluffing and stuff going on, and I didn't score that many points, but I think I was the only guy. I think the guy, one of the guys on the scene, Rob Treasure, he had a really, really well-oiled Ventru toolbox deck that would just grind people to death. And I sat in front of him one of the rounds of my Tremere deck, and I was like, I'll block you. And he's like, what? Because all the rest of the guys that were playing were just really into set light. And I'm like, no, I'll block you. And just completely shut his deck down. And he was like, and that was quite a surprise for him. That was kind of my takeaway from that very first tournament, that I managed to stop this guy that nobody else could. And then got to know those guys. They were really good guys. Ended up becoming the Prince of London to start running my own events, my own little group in London. Ended up then being responsible for running national events that the following Gen Cons, we did big tournaments, and I ended up taking over and running a lot of those, or at least helping to run a lot of those. So I was then heavily involved in the organised play scene, and then it trickled down the chain that LSJ from White Wolf wanted to tap the community to play, no pun intended, to play test some of the future sets that were coming out. So me and my little London group, we got to then play test a whole bunch of the things that he was working on. I know we did Bloodlines, Knights of Reckoning, Kindred Most Wanted. I think we were kind of helping to play test and giving. I would collate all the notes and send them all back to him, and that sort of became a thing as well. And then through to when White Wolf dropped the game entirely, and there was nothing happening again. And then there was a community initiative to start just developing cards just for fun, like not officially, because there wasn't any way to get them officially printed, but there was this idea that we could make cards for ourselves. And I got together with Ben Peel. Actually, and initially there were some other guys as well that were all kind of like batting ideas around and trying to get this project together. And some of these other guys didn't necessarily want to play very well with a wider group of people and didn't take criticism very well. But but I just put my flag up and I was like, well, I am a game. I have credit as a game designer already. I do know how this works. I'm like to think I can bring a bit more of a I guess more of a design head, more of an open mind to the game. So not just make whatever the fans want, or just whatever I personally want, but just have a wider perspective about the different design mechanisms within the game and what's working, what's not working, and how to drop sort of interesting new little things into it that might change the perception of the way people play, like how they view the game, how they play the game, like a new card that makes people go, oh, I've never thought about playing the game this way before. That's the kind of what I wanted to do with it and what I wanted to try and bring to the whole thing. We experimented with some PDFs. That seemed to go down pretty well, and then when Hugh came along with Black Chantry to make it official, I think everyone was hoping that a bigger company would pick it up, and that wasn't going to happen. So Hugh, who I know quite well personally, actually, because he's based in the UK as well, he just was like, well, I'll just do it myself then. Just got the money together. Put a team together, went to Paradox, who our life told us to make it happen, and then we suddenly went from becoming an unofficial design team to becoming the official design team. It's like, why, if it ain't like it was working before, then there's no reason why it can't work still. Make new official cards, and then go back and reprint some of the cards we made before, and this is where we are now.
So you've always been involved, not always, but ever since, I guess, White Wolf decided to drop the product, you've then always sort of been involved in the design side of things. So working with Ben and effectively, yeah. I mean, the whole post White Wolf phase. I've had a hand in, definitely and of course as well. I mean, it's not terribly well known, but my first board game success as a designer was doing the official Vampire, the Requiem, Prince of the City game for White Wolf. That was I kind of already had like a dialogue going on with them anyway, with all this VtES stuff was going on, and. There is actually, and I am kind of quite. What actually happened was I designed that for Masquerade, all the original playtesting, all the original design scripts for Masquerade, and at the last minute they said, "Oh yeah, by the way, we're killing our original universe, and we're going to go to Requiem instead, and you need to change this game to match the new one, not the old one." And I was like, "Oh, really? Okay." That was very much a last minute thing, but I am sort of quietly hopeful as well that at some point maybe that game could be resurrected too, maybe because I've still got all my notes for Masquerade. It will still work for Masquerade. Someone will give it a polish, and maybe even Black Chantry. I've spoken to Hugh about maybe he branches out and maybe publishes some other games, and that could be a possibility that he takes that game and we do a new edition of that. But we'll see. I mean, he's also a big fan of the Rage, the werewolf card game as well. Yeah.
I know there's a whole separate community that's trying to keep that alive too. But that's also another possibility that maybe we start dabbling with that as well. Who knows?
Yes. So, how does it is there a difference between with the Prince of the City board game? Essentially, you're designing the IP for Vampires still there. Like you mentioned, you had to sort of stick closely to originally it was the Masquerade and then became Requiem, so you had to stick to that. So I guess there is still a bit of a sandboxy sort of, not so much sandbox, like there's a box where you had to design within. But I guess my question is did it feel different to design something completely standalone and you could sort of get away with your own ideas and designs, and compared to something like designing essentially what's an expansion for VtES where you've got 25 years of stuff that's come along, and you have to not only design with your, like, you not only have to put your ideas into the product, you also have to be it actually has to work with and, I guess, complement rather than break whatever that's come before. So was there a big difference in that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's some different sort of things to untangle there around the design process generally, for like how you approach different games, different projects. And essentially, yeah, there are quite big differences between trying to service a world or a concept or an idea that's quite well defined already, and you kind of have to, you've got to think very much within those specific parameters to just a complete blank slate and do whatever you like. I mean, I actually do prefer having somewhere to start, some kind of guidance, some kind of boundaries or parameters to work with, because it kind of informs the choices you make. It's good to have some kind of starting point. I'm very much a theme-driven designer generally. I mean, even if you gave me like a game like a blank slate, the first I think about is how do you model this in a game framework? Does it make sense to use cards? Does it make sense to use dice? Are the decisions you make as a player, do they feel natural? Do they feel like you've got agency? Like if you're driving a submarine, it's like, do you feel like the decisions you're making make you feel like you're driving a submarine, or do you just feel like you're pushing cubes around or like just using a calculator? I mean, it's the to me, because I mean, broadly, I mean, the hobby is huge now. I mean, the last 12 months or so, there was probably well over 2,000 new game titles published in terms of tabletop board gaming, like by different companies worldwide, and it's getting very saturated now. And but a lot of them are like we call Euro games, where it's more about the mathematics, and there's like an interesting puzzle, an interesting engine that you're building, but what it is, like, and what your motivation for doing it is, almost doesn't matter at all. It's just you're just pushing cubes around. You're just trying to score points. You could be, I mean, it's like farming is like a huge theme you see quite a lot, or some kind of agricultural related thing, or some kind of like economic related thing. And when I play a lot of these games, I'm just like, who cares? I'm just like, this is, I can't get emotionally invested in this cube pushing thing. I want to be like a pirate captain. I want to be like the submarine driver. I want to be the vampire king of the city, or whatever it is. I want to feel like whatever I'm doing makes me feel like I am that person. I'm in that role, that I'm in that world, and that the decisions I make are going to matter within the context of that setting. That's always been important to me, and it's informed all my other work as well. I mean, with like the Dice Hospital and Dice Theme Park, it's very much trying to create a puzzle where it feels very natural. Like it feels like this, I am actually running a hospital, or I am actually running a park. I am kind of get invested in what my little people are doing. That was quite important to me. And so I guess with VtES specifically, and particularly with my role-playing background as well, it's how do you surface that world? How do you keep it authentic? And it was very important to the licensing process between Black Chantry and Paradox as well. That's what they wanted too. They just like the fact that people play the game, and they like the fact there's a community and that appreciates the World of Darkness, and they want to keep feeding that community. I mean, like all the live role players, all the tabletop role players as well. They want to just keep feeding that community and keep it alive. But they also want to. They've got a very specific vision about what their world is and how it should be serviced and what those themes are. And they want anyone that's making a licensed product to really commit to that. And it was quite helpful actually that we'd already done those PDF sets before, which were quite heavily driven by theme and by story. We were always very much, we need a vampire. Okay, quick, let's just rummage through all the books and see, can we find a La Sombra that hasn't been used yet, or an Nosferatu that hasn't been used yet? Even if it's just like a one-liner that mentions somebody's name, it's like we can take that name, we can make that a crypt card, and we're really servicing that universe, and we're really locked into what the publisher's doing with that universe. And I think they appreciated seeing that in the PDF sets that we've done already. And it was fundamental to the agreement going forwards that we would service their vision of V5, the Vampire 5th edition, with any new cards that we would officially make. Which has proved to be both a blessing and a curse, because they deliberately changed some things in Vampire 5th edition that have been quite awkward to consider. In a role-playing game setting, if you've never played before, you can just sit down and play Vampire 5th edition and not know that any of these changes took place. Or even if you were like a long-time storyteller like me, you can just sort of hand wave and go, yeah, something happened over there, and my little version of that world can just kind of continue without really experiencing too much impact. But with VtES, with this huge corpus of existing cars, this huge existing design space, the game has its own memory, really, that all the way back to 94, there are cards that you can still play that were printed in 94, and we want to ensure that you can still play them now, but at the same time, introduce new things that are going to be interesting to play too, and that are going to serve Paradox's vision of the universe at the same time. I guess that sort of answers the question. I realize that was a bit of a
No, it's good to sort of get an insight into some of the I guess more technical, the combination of some of the more technical stuff, and also a combination of like the thought process behind it. Because this is like this is stuff that you don't necessarily pick up when you look at the cards. I mean, you pick up the theme, you pick up like that VtES especially. We typically see some sort of story in between each set, generally more or less. But there's always that little bit of thought process behind how things, So it was great. It was great to hear all of that. And I'm guessing, is it sort of like a natural progression from being involved in set designs for VKN and then now Black Pantry to being credited as the lead designer for Fall of London? Fundamentally, the core team is just the two of us, me and Ben right now. Responsibility, I guess, has been. He's the boss, really. He takes the lead normally, and that's fair enough. I mean, he's officially Black Chantry, and I'm just a contractor, really, just a sort of a freelancer. But yeah, I mean, we talk about a lot of the cards together. We sort of regularly huddle online and sort of because he's based in the States, I'm based in the UK, so we'll sort of do regular call catch-ups and talk about what we're thinking about, what the community is feeding back to us, and what to do next, and sometimes carve off different jobs, and like because a lot of the recent sets we've focused on different clans at once. So it'll be like you take those two clans, I'll take those two clans, we'll come back and meet in the middle and come and sort of comment and sort of cross-pollinate and so on. Fall of London, I guess, is slightly different in that I also had the opportunity to write for the role-playing game as well. There was a period where Paradox had engaged with a UK company called VtES Entertainment, who are based in London, and I know some of those guys quite well as well. And when they said that they were going to be distributing vampire books and potentially writing vampire books, my ears pricked up, and I was like, well, if there's any opportunity to get involved, let me know. And with the Fall of London, it was the first book they got to make themselves, really, because with the original 5th edition book and with the Camarilla and the Camarilla and Anarch books that first came out for 5th edition, Paradox had basically put together a little think tank of people and had pre-written all that material. Paradox don't make books, but they kind of wanted to make sure that their initial vision of it was how they wanted it, so they were heavily involved in creating that content for themselves, and then basically just said to VtES, here are the books, go away and print them, go away and distribute them, sell them, take care of that logistical piece for us.
The Fall of London was the first book that VtES got to do for themselves, and they weren't terribly familiar with vampire in the office. None of them were huge World of Darkness fans, so they wanted somebody that knew the universe really, really well, that also knew London really, really well as a location, and could be someone that they could trust to be involved in the project in terms of being their eyes and ears of what's going on the ground. Because what actually happened was it was split up between 6 writers as freelancers, and we basically got chunks of the book each to make. And a lot of these writers came from other places. A lot of them, I think, had written for what are they called? The sort of the other ex-White Wolf outfit that's my brain's gone blank all of a sudden.
Is it Onyx?
The guys.
Onyx
Path, that's it, yeah. A lot of them have done work for Onyx Path before and were recommended on that basis, and they've worked with each other before. But this was kind of my first time sort of dipping my toe in sort of that direction. But as it turns out, a lot of them weren't terribly engaged in the project, and it ended up being me. We had like a Slack channel between us where we were like discussing stuff. Well, I was trying to generate discussion about it, but what ended up happening was most of the story outline I came up with and kind of shared with the group, and my bit of the book ended up being the sort of the prologue and the first chapter and the epilogue. So I got to top and tail like the story as a whole, and I came up with all the stuff around Mithras and his return and Camden, his sort of sidekick and his background. I kind of defined, because it was interesting actually as an exercise as a writer, going back through some of these previous vampire books, trying to piece that story together, because I don't know how much you know like the story person like yourself in terms of the wider background, but in the first edition World of Darkness book there was something about Britain and Mithras, and in the second edition World of Darkness book there was something else about Britain and Mithras. And in other books they would refer to him and some of his associates, but some of it was quite contradictory, and the continuity didn't quite add up. So it was quite an interesting process to explain all of that and trying to bring it all together into like a cohesive story. But yeah, Fall of London was fundamentally a story about Mithras' return. Mithras is this huge, this very powerful venturing Methuselah from the role-playing background, originates in Persia somewhere, took on the title of Mithras, the sort of the sun god, and sort of infiltrated sort of Roman society at the time, sort of like when the Empire of Rome was at its heights, and a lot of the senators, a lot of the sort of the soldiers and the generals were all part of, all subscribed to this cult of Mithras, and he just sort of took that over in sort of the background of the world and sort of used that for his own ends. So it became a cult about him and a way for him to be able to influence the sort of the Roman Empire. But he also visited Britain and decided that Britain was going to be his domain. And when the Roman Empire collapsed, he basically settled in Britain and sort of took that over, and sort of subjugated most of the other vampires in the country to his will, as it were. And he's been a prominent part of the background of the world, except in like for the 20th century, like after the Second World War and the Blitz, where a load of stuff got blown up in London, he kind of disappears, and everyone thinks that he's dead, and some people even claim that they know that he's dead, but actually it's a bit more complicated than that.
It always is a little bit more complicated than that, isn't it?
And in the modern and sort of the where Fall of London is set is quite interesting, in that it's not actually the fifth edition world. The fifth edition world, as you see it in the main rule book, is where the Second Inquisition is already happening, the beckoning is already happening. The sort of the world is kind of starting to turn against vampires, whereas the Fall of London is set a few years back between. I guess it's almost like Vampire 4.5, in that you're getting to play in an era before a lot of that sort of kicked in. and you as players, if you sit down to play the Fall of London, you get to play some sort of low-level characters who are sympathetic to the cult of Mithras, and you have to make decisions about: do you help Mithras try and come back and take over, or do you deny him that opportunity? And you as players get to kind of decide that. All the while, in the backdrop, what's going on in the background is the first efforts of the UK government to just become aware of vampires and trying to do something about it. Like the first steps of the Second Inquisition are happening in the background, and you kind of get to see that ramp up over the course of the story at the same time.
So there are a few cards. There are a few cards. Well, we're sort of deep into spoiler season at this the Fall of London VtES set at the moment. I guess to a certain extent it's spoiler season for players who are not familiar with the Fall of London Vampire the Masquerade sort of source book, but at the same time we're kind of in this sort of preview / spoiler season, and so you've talked about like how the sort of the more vampire side of things, the cult of Mithras, and I think Queen Anne plays a significant part as well in the Fall of London. But we did notice there, and this actually generated a bit of conversation in one of the local groups, where we've got a few cards that specifically have got the trait Operation Antigen. Yep. You mentioned that Fall of London is actually set slightly before what's actually present time for V5. Does that mean that Operation Antigen as a thing is only going to be contained within Fall of London, or is that something we might be seeing further down the line in like future, be it Vampire the Masquerade or even VtES sets?
It's an interesting question. In terms of spoilers, I can see that Henrik's dropped a number of the cards from the set out to different sort of bloggers and commentators and so on, just to generate some interest around the set. I would say that we've been quite careful to, although you will see a variety of characters and locations that are in the Fall of London story, there's not a lot. There isn't a lot of context around why they're in the card set, so you can play the cards without needing to know the Fall of London story, but also without necessarily spoiling what happens in the book if you want to go away and play that too. But Operation Antigen is quite a specific part of that story, and it is, as you say, linked to the Second Inquisition part of it. It's really, I guess, the London's version of the Second Inquisition is given the title Operation Antigen. The sort of this cooperation between local government and security forces and police and so on. So it is a keyword that is quite specific to this set because it matches the content of the book. But obviously, as a design space, there is the opportunity that we could keep adding to it. In terms of our thinking there, we've not really discussed it. We've not really planned that yet. I think we just want to see how it goes first in terms of how it's received and how it works, particularly in a competitive sense, to see do we need to add to it? Is it working? Is it not working? Well, I guess we'll wait and see. But back to Paradox and the license and the agreement and so on. When first composed Fall of London, I was mostly focused on the vampire side of it, and one of the license approval process, their guy was saying, well, where is the Second Inquisition represented in this set? Because it's a big part of the book. We want it to be a part of this set as well. So we did have to. We couldn't not do it. So there had to be some consideration of that part of the theme as well.
This kind of feels like a excellent lead into jokes around nobody expects the Second Inquisition.
Sure. But from the role-playing game perspective, when fifth edition was originally released, and Paradox started talking about this new idea of the Second Inquisition, it was only talked about in very general terms, and my thought was always that whoever these people are that are hunting vampires aren't going to be calling themselves the Second Inquisition. That doesn't make any sense. That's clearly a label that the vampires themselves have put upon these people, this effort, whoever it is. And actually, now the Second Inquisition book is out. It's on my shelf here as well. Is you can read and see. It's not just one group of people. It's a disparate bunch of. You got some government agencies here. You've got some church groups here. You've got some local community vigilante people here, and they've all learned about vampires, and they're all dealing with it in their own different ways. From a vampire perspective, it's like, oh no, it's really, really well organized and really, and they give it this one label, but actually it's a lot more complicated than that. And I guess for me, in picking the term Operation Antigen for the London, the London effort, is sort of the wiping out of the vampires there is sort of really leaning into that idea of these are much smaller groups with their own different agendas and their own different resources. And
so coming back to the design of the VtES set, what was the process like for you to translating a VTM sort of role-playing, tabletop role-playing material into cards? Because I would expect the role-playing tend to be a little bit more freeform, like you would sort of, put up a scene, say this is kind of what's potentially happening, and then it's kind of up to the players to decide how they want to run the scene and then tell the story. Whereas on a card, you, I guess, purely just because of how the amount of space you have got on the card, you need to be more concise. And so what was the process like for you in this translation? To your point, it's one of the things that I've always liked about VtES is the way every time you sit down to play with your friends, with other players, like 5 of you around the table, you're getting to tell your own little version of like the World of Darkness story, like and it leads to like often some quite funny stories that you can tell like anecdotally afterwards. It's like, oh yeah, Beast came over here and rushed this person here, or Matacintha burned this character here, or Queen Anne managed to do this vote, or this thing happened, and I managed to do this and block this person and scupper their plans, and this whole sort of natural and emergent story comes out of every game, which I really like. It's going very much to, it goes back to what I was saying about Thebe and immersion and wanting to feel like you're there, and the theme's always been a big driver, and when we've been designing the cards all the way through. But I would say with Fall of London specifically, it was probably more motivated by just servicing the material than it was about addressing the wider design landscape or addressing sort of like competitive concerns and all that kind of thing. With when we went back and we did like the original Sabat PDF cards and the waves of cards that we did for like the Bruges, the Gangrel, the Nosferatu, we were always looking for thematic inspiration, but the key drivers were how do we make these clans more competitive? How do we motivate people to play these clans more, to go back and pick out other cards from their collections and go, oh yeah, I never used this before because it was never worth it, but now the synergies of these new things, now I'm going to play them. That was kind of top of mind throughout most of the design process. But with Fall of London, I guess it was a bit more of getting the opportunity to service the work that I did on the role-playing game side, like with the original writing, and just and bringing in some new themes. So with the Operation Antigen, it's probably more of an experiment than anything that we've printed so far. But if it goes down well, we could potentially look at doing that again. One of the projects that's potentially on the table is there are 2 New York themed computer games, Coteries of New York and Shadows over New York, which reference some characters from the New York
story in the role-playing game, which has also been evolving over time, and introducing new characters. And there's the opportunity maybe to service that with a little pack as well. There's so much material, like in terms of the wider world and the wider landscape. There's lots of ways, lots of things that we could service. It's more really just about Black Chantry's what Hugh and the core team want to do in terms of because everyone's doing it in their spare time. Everyone's we can only move so fast in terms of the product we can produce. There's one thing that came up actually in the European Championship where a couple of the guys were saying, it's like, when are we going to see these types of cards, and when are we going to see these types of cards, and when are we going to get more cards for these guys? And it's like, yeah, whoa guys. we'd love to do all of that. But at the same time, Hugh's company is a very small operation, and it is everyone's spare time, so we can only move so fast. So if it's probably going to be 1 or 2 sets a year for the foreseeable future, just on that basis. So we just have patience. We are going to get there, but it's just going to take time to fill in more of the gaps.
So considering this, like you mentioned, right, this is a little bit of an experiment from Black Chantry's point of view, where it's a self-contained set that doesn't really reference much outside of a particular source book. Were there anything from the source material that you would have liked to have ended up in VtES, but due to whatever reason, you had to leave it on, I guess, the cutting floor? Sorry, the editing floor. Is that what it's called? Yeah, that's what they call it, I think.
Yeah, the cutting room floor. Yeah, that's,
there we go.
I think we did. I think it is pretty well rounded in terms of representing the different characters, different locations. There wasn't much left over. I guess the only thing that I might like to have done is to have played more with the concept of the cult of Mithras. There is a nod to it. There are a few cards that kind of about that in the set, but it might be good maybe to come back and play around some more with that as a concept, because the cult of Mithras does still exist in the modern V5 universe, not just in London but across the world. There are vampires that still venerate Mithras as a god, and you can leverage that influence potentially to your advantage or disadvantage. That might be something to come back to a bit more, and also with the like Operation Antigen, there's a little sprinkle of cards that will synergize together. But maybe we add some do some more with that later. I don't know. But I don't feel like we failed to service anything in the book.
That's good to know.
Mm-hmm.
So with this being again tying back to the, I know I keep coming back to it, but it's really interesting that you guys are trying out something new in terms of like experimenting with what's possible in set design. How would this, because with the conversations around what cards have been spoiled so far, or rather what cards have been previewed so far, there's been a fair bit of excitement, and also I kind of sense there's a little bit of confusion. So in terms of like strategies and all that, how would you envision, or what was your, if there was any, what was your original vision of how you would like players to approach this particular set?
Well, I guess it's, following on from what we discussed, I suppose it's just spreading awareness around the story, spreading awareness around the fact that it is a wider universe. We fully expect that out of the pack of cards, people are just going to cherry pick, this vampire is going to go into this deck, and this vampire is going to go into that deck, and this location is going to go here, and it's like, well, that's inevitable, that's going to happen. But at the same time, hopefully it's going to spark more questions about where did this character come from? What is the story of London? Maybe let's go and have a look at the book and learn more about it. I think that's definitely where Paradox themselves are coming from in terms of approving this product and allowing it to happen. Is that they want that story to spread. They want to see that story served and for people to be interested in it. But at the same time, like mechanically, back to the Operation Antigen thing there, these that's potentially a new module that you could introduce to a deck that you didn't have access to before. I know that the British Museum has been spoiled already. That gives you access to easy access to some types of equipment. Which might open up new deck designs as well. It's always kind of it's always a two-pronged approach in terms of serving the story, serving the sort of the meta game. Those priorities aren't always equal. Sometimes it's more one, more the other, but we're always thinking about the two in everything that we do.
And I guess one last quick question before we end this podcast. What would fans of your work or fans of Fall of London out there be likely to see in terms of something that you would probably lead the design in future, either in VtES or the World of Darkness in general?
I hope I'm going to continue to be involved in helping VtES going forwards. We've got some, we're discussing various new projects at the moment. That we are conscious that some of the clans haven't been served properly yet. There's a big question mark around obviously the Sombra and the Hakata and how they're going to get translated, because there are some quite significant changes in Vampire 5th Edition around those two clans. We are going to have to deal with that sooner or later, so we're discussing that right now. We've also because based on the V5 companion that's now been released, we do have some guidance around how the Celebri, the Samish, and the Ravnos should be treated. So we're looking at that as well. There's other licensed products like the New York computer games. There's also it's like a shoot 'em up style game. I can't remember what it's called, but we've been talking to them about at least doing some promos around that game. That's going to continue to there's lots of stuff to do there, which I'm quite excited about. But simultaneously, I'm also still doing other non-vampire stuff. I've probably got about 4 different sort of board game projects that are in flight at the moment. There's the third dice game in the series that I've done for Radicat Games that we're looking at the moment. Sort of a big box area control style game as well. I've also got a game about being a monk in a medieval monastery. It's inspired by Lindisfarne, the Holy Island. It's sort of story in British history and early Christian sort of history that I'm potentially still trying to find a home for. I've been working on for quite a while. What really just constrains me is all spare time stuff. So I've got a whiteboard somewhere with about 20 or 30 different potential game projects on it that I'd love to do.
So is there a space on the internet where your fans can go and, I guess, for lack of a better word, stock, so that they get first-hand knowledge when something new of yours comes out?
A good place to go, which if you're into tabletop games generally, is a website called Board Game Geek. It's very popular for hobbyists. It's pretty much an encyclopedia of every game that's ever been made. You can search it and find it, see who made it. You can post reviews about them. You can get help with rules. You can potentially contact the creators through it. That's a good place to look, and anything that I make is going to end up being in their database. So that would be my recommendation. Is if you don't already use Board Game Geek, sign up and You can find everything there.
Nice. Thank you very much, Mike, for coming on to this podcast.
No problem. Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about this stuff, as you can tell.
We kind of unexpectedly got a little bit of look ahead as to what the VtES fans and fan of your work can look forward to, and that's amazing. So I'd like to take this opportunity to remind the viewers at home that if you like this episode, do give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below. It really does help the channel a lot. And also, if you want to support the channel directly, and head over to patreon.com/swakuoz, and any amount of support would go a great way to helping out this channel. Also, let us know in the comments below if you want to see Mike in a future episode of Shell Games. We might be able to convince him if we get enough comments doing it. Until next time, see ya!
Yep. Take care. Bye for now.